Picture this. You're arriving at a totally isolated farmhouse in rural Germany. It's quiet, like the kind of heavy, eerie silence that instantly makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up because you just know something is terribly wrong. You've come to check on the family living there, but as you walk up to the property, there's absolutely no movement. Nothing. You step inside, and what you find is going to form the basis of our explainer today. We are taking a deep dive into a century-old mystery that is, honestly, going to chill you right to the bone.
So the entire farm is just cloaked in this deeply unsettling stillness. The family hasn't been seen for days by anyone in the nearby town. But as you look around the property, the scene in front of you just doesn't make any sense. There's zero sign of a forced entry anywhere. The doors aren't broken, the windows are totally intact, and even more bizarrely, the farm animals have clearly been fed recently. On top of all that, there's fresh evidence that meals have been cooked in the kitchen.
You look up, and you actually see smoke still rising from the chimney. The house is warm, it feels lived in, but the people who are supposed to be living there are nowhere to be found. And that is exactly when the horrific truth is uncovered. A search of the property leads to the shocking discovery of 6 bodies, the entire family completely wiped out. Okay, let's dive into this.
But you know what? The presence of the bodies isn't even the most terrifying part of this whole scene. Investigators quickly realize an absolutely horrifying truth based on that warm stove, the fed animals, and those cooked meals. Whoever committed this horrific crime didn't just panic and flee into the night. No, they stayed. The killer literally lived among the dead in what has to be one of history's most chilling and baffling unsolved cases. To understand how this could possibly happen, we really need to go back and look at the victims. Chapter 1. The Lonely Farm. The spring of 1922.
We need to set the scene a bit, so let's take ourselves all the way back to this remote, isolated farm called Hinterkaifeck. It's tucked away among the really dense forest and sweeping fields of Bavaria. The household was made up of the patriarch, Andreas Gruber, and his wife, Cecilia. Living right there with them was their widowed daughter, Victoria, along with Victoria's 2 young children. And finally, rounding out the household was a brand new maid, and in a detail of just incredibly tragic timing, this new maid had actually started her work at the farm a mere matter of hours before the events we're about to discuss unfolded. Life out here was quiet. Actually, it was way too quiet.
And this brilliantly illustrates how a creeping tension really began to take hold of the farm in the days leading up to the tragedy. Strange things were happening. For instance, the previous maid had actually quit, straight up claiming the farmhouse was haunted. Then Andreas discovered unfamiliar footprints in the snow. And these footprints led directly from the forest toward the farm, but there were no footprints leading away. Let that sink in. Later, he heard phantom footsteps echoing up in the attic. House keys mysteriously disappeared. A newspaper suddenly showed up in the home that no one in the family remembered buying. But tragically, nobody realized that these escalating, totally bizarre anomalies were actually warnings.
Chapter 2. The Night of Horror. March 31st, 1922.
So the sun sets on the evening of March 31st, and the creeping dread that's been hanging over the farm finally breaks. The sequence of events that night is methodical, and it is entirely ruthless. Someone waiting in the pitch darkness of the property manages to lure members of the family out into the barn, and they do it one by one. The killer is just waiting in the shadows. Using what investigators later determined to be a mattock, which, if you don't know, is this very heavy farming tool with a sharp axe-like blade, the attacker strikes. First Andreas falls, then Cecilia, then Victoria, and finally, 7-year-old Cecilia. The attacker violently strikes down 4 family members, and each victim dies completely separately in the cold, dark barn.
So the crucial point is the staggering contrast between what is happening outside and what is going on inside. Out in the barn, you have 4 brutalized victims hidden in the dark. But inside the house, little 2-year-old Josef is sleeping peacefully in his cot. The new maid, who just finished her very first day of work, is resting in a room. Neither of them has any idea whatsoever of the slaughter that just took place mere yards away. And neither of them knows that death is only moments away, as the killer leaves the barn and silently enters the house to finish the job.
Sadly, neither survives. The final death toll is 6. 6 people brutally murdered in the dead of night. And because of the severe isolation of the Hinterkaifeck farm, tucked so far away in those Bavarian forests, no one was around to hear them scream.
Chapter 3. The Impossible Discovery. A few days later.
After the horrific events of March 31st, days just begin to pass. Neighbors start to notice that this fiercely routine family hasn't been to church. The mail carrier realizes the post is just piling up untouched. The children miss several days of school. So when locals finally decide to visit the farm to check on the Grubers, they uncover a legendarily grim reality. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark contrast. Out in the barn, the victims are found hidden beneath stacked hay. But inside the house, the locals find that fresh food has been prepared recently. There are dirty dishes just sitting on the kitchen table. Out in the pastures, the livestock has been totally cared for and someone has been diligently feeding the cattle. Fires have been actively lit in the fireplaces to keep the house warm. The evidence was absolute. Someone had been living there, after the murders, for several days.
As our source material chillingly puts it, the killer was sharing the farmhouse with 6 corpses for several days. It is a horrific, completely anomalous reality. The killer didn't panic. They didn't flee. They carried on a perfectly normal domestic life, cooking, eating, doing farm chores, and keeping warm, right alongside the bodies they had just created. It's a psychological detail that just completely defies all logic.
Chapter 4. The investigation. The chaotic aftermath.
The immediate aftermath of this discovery is pure chaos. The police arrive at Hinterkaifeck to search every single room of the farm, desperately trying to piece together a motive for such a brutal, bizarre crime. And the very first question that naturally comes to mind, and I'm sure you're asking yourself this right now, is, was it a robbery? Did someone come to this remote farm to steal from the Gruber family and things just got violently out of hand?
Well, the answer to that is a resounding no. Investigators quickly note that valuables in the home remain completely untouched. Large amounts of cash are easily found, just sitting right there inside the house. The killer literally had days to search the property and take whatever they wanted, but they took absolutely nothing of monetary value. So robbery is entirely ruled out as a motive. Unfortunately, the investigation was pretty much doomed from the start, due to massive failures in securing the scene. Curious villagers, who were obviously shocked by the news, literally just walked right through the farmhouse before investigators could finish collecting evidence. Because of this massive contamination, potential clues are trampled on and they disappear forever. As a result, despite having some suspects early on, no arrests are ever made. The case grows colder and colder as the years go by, and no confession ever comes to light. The killer simply slips away into history.
Chapter 5. Theories. Let's move to and see how this builds.
For over a century now, this case has haunted true crime enthusiasts and investigators alike, spawning so many theories about who could have possibly committed this atrocity. The central question remains, who stayed inside Hinterkaifeck? Was it someone who had been living secretly up in that attic, pacing the floorboards before the murders? Was it a disgruntled acquaintance who knew the layout of the farm really well? Some suspect a rejected lover of Victoria's? Others point to a wandering criminal, or maybe someone the family deeply trusted who ultimately betrayed them. The real problem is that even more than a century later, no single theory cleanly explains every bizarre detail. No single suspect accounts for the mysterious footprints in the snow, the missing keys, the random newspaper, and the brutal, methodical efficiency of the killings.
And above all else, none of the theories can answer the ultimate question here. Why calmly live inside the farmhouse after committing Germany's most horrifying murder? Like, what kind of abnormal psychology allows a person to violently execute 6 people, including young children, and then comfortably fry up a meal and feed the cows as if absolutely nothing happened?
Chapter 6. An Enduring Mystery. The Unanswered Questions.
The story of Hinterkaifeck doesn't offer us that neat, resolved ending we usually crave in stories like this. In the aftermath of the tragedy, the case remains officially unsolved to this very day. The physical farmhouse, soaked in so much dark history, was eventually completely demolished. Today, nothing remains of the site except black and white photographs, decaying police reports, and a mountain of unanswered questions. Some mysteries fade with time, but this one, it only seems to become darker. Because the truly horrifying reality is that somewhere, the person who committed these brutal murders likely lived out the rest of their natural life without ever facing justice, completely unidentified. And that leaves us with this final, truly terrifying thought from our source material to reflect on. For several days after the killings, they weren't running from the crime. They were still at home. The monster wasn't hiding out in the woods. The monster was sitting right there at the kitchen table. Keep that chilling image in mind as you think about the enduring, deeply unsettling mystery of Hinterkaifeck.